Hello, my name is Aram Tal and I'm a climate information services scientist from Senegal. It's my great pleasure to be joining you today. Though from remotely, my multiple apologies. I am physically in southern India at the moment and couldn't join in this morning. But it's my immense pleasure nonetheless to share a few thoughts on a topic that's very dear to my heart. Why is it that African farmers need climate services? I've spent the past 5 years surveying farmer communities from Senegal, my home country, to Uganda, to Mozambique, to Niger, to Burkina Faso, Kenya, Egypt, and most recently Mali. In all these communities, I've asked farmers one question: how is it that climate change is impacting your livelihoods, if at all? How is it impacting your ability to provide for your families and still provide a decent level of living for you, for yourself and yours? Across all the surveyed communities, through farmer testimonials and focus group discussions, what we found is that indeed farmers are already adapting, and that's an important fact to establish. They are adapting by walking extra miles to find arable land. They're adapting by organizing themselves through solidarity networks, which are akin to local insurance schemes, so to say. However, there is a point where local adaptation capacities fall short, and a little push is needed to enable farmers to really cope and keep facing and withstanding climate shocks and related risks. I'm convinced that one of these ways we can give a little push from the outside to farmers is by providing them with decision relevant, salient, and timely climate information services that can guide their decision making throughout the planting season. So, to answer the question shortly, climate services provide a critical input for improved farm level risk management. At the seasonal timescale, when a farmer is provided with a forecast, she can select cultivars based on that. If the outlook is not favorable, she can choose alternative livelihoods and decide to opt out of agriculture or send some of the kids out on exodus for the season. At the mid range level, if you take a decadal forecast, that enables a farmer to anticipate wet and dry spells, to know when rains are expected to be coming. And this is a critical way for which a farmer can manage risk and determine harvest operations, plant clear fields, and again send a message that should get the community. So that when the forecast event indeed materializes or not, then the farmer is in a position to determine the right time to harvest, to determine the timing of pesticide use and fertilizer application. And that's one critical way through which the farmer can evade crop losses and avoid investments in times of uncertainty, whereas the information empowers a farmer to really anticipate and manage climate risks. So, borrowing a slide from the Red Cross Climate Center, we see here the notion of early warning, early action really coming to fore, and farmers being in a position to have the information and to know when risks are coming so that they can plan ahead of them and really ensure that climate hazards, which climate scientists see on their screens, are coming, don't necessarily turn into full blown climate crisis, which rock the livelihoods of farmers across the region. One of my favorite stories to illustrate this concept, it comes from Mali, whereby a number of farmers have been benefiting for almost 30 years from Mali's Agromet Advisory Service and assistance. We can listen to them in their own words.
Abora kaloko ina ajate labbe sugi menyu anave ame radio la me mado ke baraka noy o an ruga la dala kudo be ame baraka noy fana.
Given the usefulness of climate information services, why is it then that farmers are not getting them? I use here the analogy, and this will resonate with people sitting in Scandinavia, the analogy of an iceberg. The top problem, which is the easiest to solve, is the fact that there is no dialogue, often in Africa and as in elsewhere, between providers of climate services and the end users of that information and that service. While such a dialogue is critical and essential to enable climate scientists and providers to identify the needs of users and to build understanding and trust over the information being provided. Secondly, there is a significant lack of a communication framework in many of these African countries So much so that even if the information is available, getting it down to the most remote farmer remains a big challenge. Furthermore, and this is going further and further down in complication towards the bottom of the iceberg, many African countries still lack observation networks that are conducive to a good historical record. As such, national hydromet services are not in a position to provide farmers with the information that is asked on onset, on intra-seasonal statistics, and this remains a main challenge which has to also be confronted. And the last one, but certainly not the least, the main developmental question. Even as farmers receive the best possible climate information, many will still not be in a position to trigger early actions in response to received information. So, this also is a call for integrating climate services into larger agricultural support and development programs. The GFCS today, however, offers all of us an important vehicle through which we can together overcome these tenacious challenges to climate information services and, so to say, lift the iceberg to realms of action. Successful pilot experiments since 2009 demonstrate that delivering climate information services to farmers is mission possible. CCAFs, as well as a number of our partners, have been working to ensure that information gets to the farmer that needs it most. However, no one can do this alone. And we found that three main challenges indeed keep us from moving forward to getting information to the farmer that needs it most. We won't be able to surmount these challenges until we hold hands and work on them together. The first one, which I'd like to highlight, is the need to focus on farmer information needs, opening spaces for iterative dialogue and interaction. On the one hand, with farmers to understand their needs and their information gaps which are not responded to and addressed by traditional indicators. And on the other hand, among climate information providers themselves, so that the person sitting at the National Met Service speaks with the hydrologist and speaks with the soil expert, so they can provide one bundled information which is relevant for a farmer and useful for him or her to make a decision. We've also found through our various experiments that involving farmers is just key to success. The participatory action research methodology has been really helpful in this sense to capture local innovation and identify and have them serve as co-producers of the information in many regards. Taking the example of communities we've worked with in Kafrine, across the 2 years where the experiment lasted, from 2011 to 2012, communities were the ones proposing ways to really reach them with information through SMS in local language, through installing forecast blackboards or bulletin boards across strategic outposts in the community. And this has really led, in terms of concrete results, from only a handful of farmers receiving information at the beginning in 2011 to 100% declared access to climate information services by the end of the experiment 2012. We also identified in each of the communities we worked with the salient communication channels to reach the last mile. And this is a critical point. This is very place specific. I show here a picture of the village chief of Malem, a village in Kafrine, central arid Senegal, who has the microphone and is telling us throughout the project that this is how you really need to reach my community. Only 10 kilometers away, another village has entirely different climate information needs and channels to reach that village. So that place specificity of needs of farmers needs to really also direct our actions and make sure that we don't have a cookie cutter solution, as this will not work. When we indeed, though, involved farmers and really insisted on the concept of the co-production of climate services, results were there. And information was deemed useful at the end of the project. And assessment results still streaming in demonstrate the added value of climate information services to traditional forecasts. So we have good news. We also have tested techniques which exist to promote a dialogue between forecasters and vulnerable communities. One of the ways which I've enjoyed using in recent years is that of a 3-day workshop, which has brought together national, regional providers of climate services face to face with farmers and farmer organization representatives to really create a space whereby, on the one hand, farmers were able to engage with the science and understand the limitations of climate forecasting and the probabilities inherent in them, And on the other hand, providers were also able to hear farmers directly and understand their needs in terms of packaging, tailoring, and alert thresholds. So, using a carousel methodology, as you see here, everyone was able to get into each other's space, and a true partnership was developed then to really get information from those that have it to those that need it to make decisions. The other piece of good news is that we also have today a plethora of innovative tools to communicate forecasting and uncertainty, so that the myth of farmers can't understand uncertainty is definitely removed from our minds. One of these didactic games I show is the one of dots, really just drawn in a workshop setting to explain to farmers how this works. And this illustrates the basic principle that the closer you get to the target, the more precise the forecast will be. And this is something that farmers got easily. Another ploy we've employed has been that of the early warning, early action game, whereby both forecasters and communities are put in a position to make a decision based on a received early warning forecast across different time scales. This also put everyone in a position to understand what it means to trigger early warnings, early actions based on warnings, and brought forecasters and end users together to really work together to put climate knowledge in the hands of the communities that needed this information most to make decisions. Other examples from CCAF's research sites from Senegal display here one of our researchers, Dr. Ousmane Jai, explaining to farmers the probabilities inherent in the seasonal forecast using the probability distribution function. So this was a massively successful way to get farmers on board on probabilities. And in Wote, the same PDF was utilized, and farmers, as you see here, they get it. They understand the probabilities, and that is not a challenge. I cannot end without stressing the importance of developing a suite of seamless forecast products, which are tailored to user needs in terms of content, in terms of timing, in terms of message forecast and language, but most of all, which provide information from the seasonal timescale, which is of interest to farmers, all the way down to nowcasting and the 3-hour forecast. This is a really potent tool through which farmers can manage uncertainties inherent in climate and weather forecasting by taking the onus of decision making away from the forecaster onto their own shoulders, because they are now able and in a position to monitor the risks as they evolve across the season all the way to the now moment. We will achieve this together. And the GFCS, I believe, offers a fantastic opportunity for us to coordinate all our efforts and ensure that climate services really get from the global centers of production to all the way down to the national hydromet services, all the way down to the most remote farmer that could use this information. Everyone has a role to play, though, in this process, from the providers of climate services across scales to the technical partners that really take the information and produce a service which is usable and actionable for end users like farmers. Bringing to bear the communicators, of course, and the national planners, without whom none of this work is possible. But all the while really keeping the frame of mind and the onus and the emphasis on the final end users, who are the communities impacted and at the front lines of the impacts of a changing climate. I'll end by saying that CCAFS is intent to work with all the partners in this room and beyond to scale up climate services for farmers in this year all the way up to 2015. And our strategy rests on 3 important tenets. The first one is identifying good practice. A workshop we held in December of last year played a critical role in identifying what is good practice to provide farmers with climate information services. And that workshop we had with USAID, with WMO, and with CSP. Once we've identified good practice, we aim to upscale it to millions of farmers across the world, working with the GFCS and within it and other partners to really install logical, coherent frameworks for climate services at the national level, leveraging very strong partnerships between the National Hydromet Service and the Agricultural Research Community and Extension Services. And finally, we need to make a case for climate services. Otherwise, how is a national government in a position to invest in climate services relative to other interventions that have a more visible direct impact, such as irrigation schemes and improved seeds? So we need to also build an evidence-based for the livelihood impacts of climate services and develop minimum assessments standards for such an evidence base. But I think we can conclude by saying that reaching farmers with climate information services is today mission possible. We will have to work together, though, to make this a reality. Examples exist to show that it is doable. Now is the time to scale up climate services for farmers. And if we don't do it right this time, I don't know when we will. So we look forward to working with all of you to making this a reality in the years ahead. Many thanks again for your attention.